Hello, my friends. I'm Lena Anderson. You may know me as the Seated View, and I'm here to talk about what to do when comorbidities get in the way of living with RA and remission. This is my second Talk Over RA session this year, and I'm one of 4 Canadian RA advocates that are providing content today and for the next few weeks. So let's talk about comorbidities, what they are, how they can get in the way of rheumatoid arthritis remission, and how you can deal with it. Say hi in the comments if you're watching, and leave your questions, your stories. How are you dealing with comorbidities? How do they affect your RA treatment, and so on. But first, what is a comorbidity? Comorbidity is very simple. At its core, it is the simultaneous presence of one or more conditions that happen at the same time as your RA. So if you have right now, my voice is crap. So you might be calling it a comorbidity. But things like fibromyalgia, diabetes, anything like that. Your RA may be your primary quote unquote condition, but and anything else is a comorbidity. So, but did you know that the way we talk about it is kind of sounds like you get RA and then you get a comorbidity, but did you know it's actually kind of flipped, that before people get RA, a lot get a number of comorbidities that increase as you get closer to the diagnosis. And once you get diagnosed, the number you get after that tends to taper off. And this is attributed to more effective medications that are now available, as well as, like the actual oomph of being treated. And these comorbidities that kind of can come up before you get your actual RA diagnosis can include other rheumatic diseases, cardiovascular conditions, for instance, high blood pressure, eye conditions, neurological conditions. And many of these are mild to moderate, and according to one of the Canadian studies I reviewed prior to this. I also reviewed studies from other places, but this particular one was Canadian. And unfortunately, the trick of comorbidities is that the more you have, the harder it may be to get control of your RA, but more on this in a little bit. So let's talk about the different kinds of comorbidities you might have. Nothing is ever simple with RA, and so it is with the conditions that come along with it. There's several different types. One is called extra-articular. This is comorbidities that are an expression of your rheumatoid arthritis inflammation. Extra-articular means other than joint. So, and it basically reflects the systemic nature of your RA. You may already know that RA doesn't just happen in your joints, it happens in your whole body. It's not like inflammation gets directed to your joints and then stays there like a, good little kid, but it actually goes all over. It can include your vascular system, your organs, your eyes, and more. And that's those comorbidities I talked about that happen before you get a diagnosis can be a reflection of that. The impact of extra-articular comorbidities can often be managed with your RA treatment, but they can create some problems if they're not treated. For instance, if you look at, this vary depending on the study I found, but some studies say that people with RA have more allergies than other people. That's one of those annoying comorbidities, usually. High blood pressure definitely should be managed, or it can cause other things. And it may be scary. This is a scary comorbidity, extra-articular one. That's all these fancy names. sometimes I kind of go, wow, all these fancy names are just rolling off my tongue, but I stumble over simple words. Brain fog. Anyway, so there are some scary comorbidities. For instance, rheumatoid arthritis can affect your cardiovascular health, and especially when it's untreated. And in fact, before we had effective treatment, people with RA actually had a lower life expectancy than others because of the systemic inflammation. And at the time, it was called the mortality gap. But before you start hyperventilating, breathe. And there are good news about this particular comorbidity, and I'll get to that in just a bit. So another type of comorbidity is autoimmune diseases. I like to say that autoimmune diseases travel in packs. And so it is, you have RA, but you may add other autoimmune diseases such as Sjogren's symptoms. Sjogren's syndrome, lupus, MS, and others. And then that's when you get into balancing treatment for each. And other comorbidities that may not be autoimmune, or we don't know if they are, can be osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, fibromyalgia, for instance. Some of the examples I'm going to talk about today is fibromyalgia. And did you know that about 30% of people with RA also have fibromyalgia? And it is quite literally a pain in the, you know what. So RA, as you know, probably is due to a malfunction in your immune system that then sees your own body as the enemy. Instead of a bacterial infection, that's a real enemy, your own body, not so much. And the literature shows that this dysregulated systemic inflammation can lead to other conditions. And many of the studies I read, and there were many, I'll put them all in a blog post once this video has been out, so look out for that. So many of these studies emphasize the importance of widening the approach to RA treatment to make sure that comorbidities also get addressed, that it becomes a full body, all condition approach rather than just narrowly focusing on joint pain. Do you have any comorbidities, and how have they affected your RA? Do you feel you get that full body treatment from your rheumatologist? Are they pulling in other specialists and working as a team? I'd love to hear your stories, and I will. At the end of this, I will chat with you in the comments, and we will figure this out together. So let's talk about how comorbidities can get in the way of RA remission, because this is what we're talking about today. For talk of RA, we know that we have many more effective treatments today than we ever did before. And the goal is to help you get into remission, but a number of things can get in the way, and one of those is comorbidities. So first, for instance, overlapping symptoms can make it difficult to assess whether your RA is in remission. For instance, symptoms that often reduce when your medication is working is things like pain, fatigue, low energy. But for instance, if you have fibromyalgia, you know that pain, fatigue, and low energy is very much a part and parcel of RA, of both RA, untreated RA, and fibromyalgia. And how do you know where RA ends and the other condition begins? Do they hyper each other into a frenzy and get worse together? And so on. And I'll share my experience in a moment. The second way that comorbidities can get in the way of remission is that the symptoms may not overlap, or maybe they do, but they affect how you feel every day. Your RA may be in the remission, but if you don't have the quality of life you therefore should have because your comorbidity is kicking up a fuss, then it's like, well, RA is in remission, but I still feel miserable because of this other thing. And that's often the case with me. I have a handful of comorbidities, as many of us do. And some of them, like for instance, I am, knock wood, because I cannot say I'm in remission without knocking something. Me superstitious? Not at all. So that's in remission. And I feel better overall because of that. But when the weather changes and my fibro is having hysterics, I'm still having a bad day. I'm still in pain. I'm still low energy. My brain isn't working as well as it should. So yes, although my RA is in remission, my fibro is messing with my quality of life. And the third way, and I'm sure there's more, but these are the third I wrote down, is that treatment for your RA may not be recommended for you because of your other condition. Like one of the very effective ways of treating RA is medications that are immunosuppressants. But if you have, for instance, I have friends who have had cancer and therefore suppressing the immune system is not recommended. So what do you do then in terms of, even though they may be in remission from cancer, but how do you then get RA into remission without suppressing the immune system? So it can be a tangle. And for this, I would recommend making really sure that your rheumatologist is talking to your other specialists so that they can kind of work together in, again, that full body, full you approach. So as I mentioned, I gathered a collection of comorbidities over the years. I am a collector of books and music and plants, and apparently comorbidities as well. That wasn't something I signed up for, but didn't have much of a choice apparently. And one of them is for fibromyalgia, and it gets in the way, as I said, with those overlapping symptoms. And I'm lucky that my RA has been in remission, but yeah, I still live with chronic pain. Much of that is from fibromyalgia. And more than once, my rheumatologist has shared her disappointment that she can't do anything about that. She said, I can suppress your RA, I can help you go into remission, but I can't really do anything about the fibromyalgia pain. And she's disappointed, I'm disappointed. And it's one of those things that complicates my treatment. Have your doctor said anything similar to that? Have you experienced remission of RA or a comorbidity, or have you had good treatment of your RA, but it's complicated by one of the other conditions you live with? Let me know in the comments. So here's the good news. Treating your RA to the point of remission, or at the very least low disease activity, because that's the goal too, can make a huge difference in how you experience comorbidities. For instance, if your comorbidities are related to RA, chances are it will do better and be controlled better when your RA meds are working. Remember that scary thing I said about heart disease and life expectancy? Well, now that we have many more very effective medications, and more people are being treated, and that mortality gap is largely closed. Your life expectancy now is much more effective. No, that's not what I was trying to say. Your life expectancy now is more or less, again, individual differences, but more or less the same as your peers. And that's excellent news. This improvement may also happen in other comorbidities that are not extra-articular, but nonetheless affected by your RA. And again, for instance, for me, when my RA is suppressed with medication, my fibromyalgia is much better than it is when my RA is active. And yeah, I can have some bad days, or bad months during winter. because my body doesn't like the cold. But generally, treating my RA makes my fibromyalgia much more manageable. For instance, if my RA is not treated, my pain levels from both is like an 8 to 9 every day on the 10-point scale. And I say that because I very rarely use number 10. That's reserved for things that make me scream or think, but my pain levels are very high when my RA is not treated. With my RA treated, my fibromyalgia is 5, 6. Yeah, it can go higher, but on average about level 5 or 6. And that's still chronic pain, and it's still significant chronic pain, but much better. And the difference is I can function, I can live my life. How do you balance your RA and other conditions? I'd love to hear if you have any tips or tricks that you can share with us. So let's talk about talking with your rheumatologist about that balance of RA treatment and addressing your comorbidities. In the past, and I lived through it, so I can say it with some authority. And you know, as I do that, I kind of tend to call it not the Black Death. Sorry, that was wrong. Whoops. Did I mention I'm tired today? All right. I call it the dark ages of rheumatology, back in the day when there were no treatments. Back then, we believed RA just happened to the joints, but we know now that it affects all of your body. With that knowledge comes an awareness that how we treat RA has to change. And one study stated that we need, and I quote, a paradigm shift from disease-centered to goal-oriented approach to develop adequate healthcare services for RA patients. Basically, instead of just treating the disease, you have to kind of look at the whole person again, and not just the physical person, but also their life. Where are they in their life? What do they want to do with that life, right? And that means considering your goals and your feedback when developing a treatment plan that's under this approach called patient-centered care. Now, you'd think that considering your goals and feedback would have happened earlier, but not so much. But it's as it should be that we're finally making that shift, and I'm really glad it's happening. Because remember, it's your body, it's your life, and you are the expert in how RA and your other comorbidities actually affect your body. I'm a big fan of treating the relationship with your medical people as a team, and also of remembering that you are the leader of the team. That team, as I said, your life, your body. That means you get to lead. But it is a skill that can take a while to learn. It means taking the lead means being assertive with people in authority. It means researching your condition. It means paying attention to what's going on in your body and kind of developing the skill of describing what that is and the impact it has on your life. And if this is a new experience for you, please know that you don't have to start from the beginning. There are tools out there to help you, and that is what this whole Talk Over RA event is for. It's to help you find those tools. And one of my favorites is the sorry for the voice. The Talk Over RA discussion guide, and it's linked below. Yes, I am participating in this, in this, and I am, as it says down there, I am being paid to share my expertise and to do those. Basically, they're paying me for my work. But Talk Over RA discussion guide, I don't just talk about that because I'm participating in this campaign. I actually use it myself. I have been part of Talk Over RA every year for about a week, for 3 years, 4 years. But in between, each fall for the rest of the year, I use this discussion guide to clarify my thoughts when I meet with my doctor. And it can be used for any topic related to your health. If you watch my first session today about working with RA, you know that we discussed this guide as being useful in terms of discussing how RA affects your work and your ability to work and still have a life. And it can be used for that, but it can also be used to talk about how your comorbidities affect you. You can take a look at the discussion guide, give it a download. It's a fillable PDF, which means you can fill it out on your computer, possibly your mobile as well. And you can talk about the symptoms, how they interact with your RA, what your goals are, and how it gets in the way. So, and I think this would probably help. You can also, of course, use this discussion guide with any of your doctors. And I just kind of love it because it's so clear, and it just really helps me clarify what I need. And of course, you can print out a copy then to give to your doctor, so they can just kind of take a quick glance at it and then know what's going on. So, comorbidities. Let's wrap this up. And comorbidities seem to be a normal occurrence with RA. And learning about what they are and how they mess with your RA and perhaps get in the way of remission, it can take time. So have patience with yourself. And most importantly, as you move forward on this journey of learning how to balance it all, remember that you will learn how to do this. The first days, first weeks, months of having a new condition and a new additional condition can be awful. There's no doubt about it. When I first got fibromyalgia, it was incredibly difficult. There were times I thought I was losing my mind because of the impact it had on me in terms of brain fog and the ability to focus. And most of the tricks I used to cope with RA pain didn't work for fibromyalgia. It was very, very difficult. But I learned which symptoms responded to, I learned which symptoms came from RA, which came from fibromyalgia. There are some differences in the pain. And if you want me to talk more about that, let me know in the comments. And I also learned how to deal with them, because just as I had learned the tips and tricks that would help my RA feel better, I eventually learned how I could help my fibromyalgia feel better. And then 2 years after I got fibromyalgia, I found a medication that enabled me to go into RA remission. And that's what I did when I discovered something kind of equally miraculous, that as my RA came under control, it also reduced my fibromyalgia symptoms. And that was a really valuable lesson. The lesson: don't give up. Keep talking to your doctors, keep learning, keep reading, keep talking to people in the community who is in the same situation and kind of can help you make shortcuts from where you are to where you can cope. So you don't have to, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, because others out there already have a lot of tips and can get you started. Feeling awful happens with RA, as well as with the conditions that come with it. But you're not helpless. Please understand this and believe me, you are not helpless. I know it can feel helpless when your body is not behaving the way it used to, but you don't have to resign yourself to suffering. With the help of your medical team, possibly a therapist, also highly recommend dealing with the mental health aspect of it. In learning to become an advocate for yourself, you will get back to living your life in the best way possible. Sure, accompanied by RA and her posse of comorbidities. But, you figure out a way, because if there's anything I've learned in life, it is that human beings are hardwired to adapt, and you will adapt too, and you will find joy and laughter again. So don't forget to follow the link to the Talk Over RA discussion guide in the box below. And if you want to share your stories, or if you have any questions, leave those too. I'll come back into the comment section, and we'll keep the conversation going there. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, we have more content coming out. We have the RA Advocates panel coming out a little later on my channel. We're going to talk about all the things we have all addressed, things like health equity, comorbidities, how RA interferes with work, and kind of how we're dealing with it. Excuse me. So that's coming up in about half an hour. And you can, of course, find that on my channel. And then next week, I'll be back to talk about fatigue and RA. Thank you so much. Enjoy the symposium, the Talk Over RA. Thanks very much. Enjoy your Talk Over RA experience, and I'll see you in a bit.